Hey guys, Targetpopper here. It's been a hot minute since we did a video, huh? This is my SKS video. I've done one in the past. I took it down. I took a lot of my stuff down recently. I was just not happy with anything right now. So I just took it all away. Anyway, I wanted to redo a video. This is the SKS. I want to take one apart again. And I wanted to do it with a standard SKS. This is a Yugoslavian M59. No grenade launcher stuff. So this is as basic of an SKS as you can really get. The M59s are a little harder to get on the market. Not very many were made compared to the 5966, the Chinese, the Russians, etc. They're actually a pretty collectible gun. Pretty hard to find. But that's not the point of the video. We're going to take it apart. So first things first, I like to take apart the gun in this way, in this manner, in this professional style. I undo the bayonet first, let it flop out. Be very careful where you put this because this is still a pointy knife thing that can hurt you very badly, or put a hole in your mom's couch if that's where you're watching this from. Then take the cleaning rod out. They can be kind of tricky. Set that aside. Then I lock the bayonet back into place. Now I recommend you wear safety glasses when you take apart a gun like this, but also when you're closing your bayonet, watch your fingers. You don't want it to get caught between those two things, between the stock and the bayonet, because that's kind of like a nip point. Okay, next, we're going to take apart the action. So lift up on this lever on the back of the receiver. So once it's pointed straight up in a 90-degree manner, put one of your fingers on the rear of the receiver cover and pull the pin out of the receiver. It's captive, so don't try to, take it out. But once the receiver cover has no spring tension on it, you can just pull it off. Take out your mainspring assembly, your bolt and carrier. Sometimes it'll come out as one piece, sometimes it won't. We're going to take apart this too, so don't worry. But we're not going to take apart the trigger group. We're not taking the rear sight off, and we're not going to take the bayonet off because the bayonet's staked in place. So, once we're that far, I'm being very careful not to hit my other SKS. Take a punch, put it in this hole right here, pivot the lever up right there. That's your gas tube retainer, and also your little action piston retainer as well. And I'll show you what that is here in a sec. Grab onto your handguard, pull your gas tube off, and then push the piston out of the gas tube. Set those two pieces aside. Now being very careful right here, put your thumb in front of your sight block and push this lever all the way out. Don't just let that fly across the room. That is a braided wire coiled spring. Be very careful with that. Again, wear safety glasses, please. Oh, also, while we're here, I like to lock the lever back into place. That way when I'm flipping and turning the rifle, I'm not going to bend it. Same with this guy right here. Put that back into place. Now, on the rear of the trigger guard of the SKS, there's a button. You need to push that button to pull the trigger group and the magazine out to get the stock off the rifle. So, using a handy dandy tool of some odd kind, mine seems to have ran away. That's sad. What we're going to do is we're going to take the tube that the cleaning kit came with and a drift, and we're going to put them together. This makes a nice little T-handled tool. You can use a punch, you can use a drift. I've used the cleaning rod before, I've used screwdrivers, whatever you can get in there. I recommend using the toolkit that came with the gun though. That's what it was made for. So put your thumb either through the trigger guard or on top of the trigger guard, whichever you're comfortable with. Make sure your safety is in the on position, because if it's in the off position, it's got two tabs on the back of the lever, which will block this pin, or this button, from going forward. So make sure that the safety is on. Put it in that button, and there you go. There is your trigger group. We're not taking this apart. No reason to take this apart. I use WD-40, Croyle, PB Black, whatever you want to squirt in there. Use a toothbrush on. If you want to use Hops 9, go for it. And then I just use like a degreaser or compressed air and just blow it all out of there. Just get it all out, and then I re-oil it with a good proper oil. Set that guy aside. Then take your magazine, open it, grab onto the magazine itself, pull it up, and then out. Sometimes these will just flop out because they're loose. This one's still pretty snug. Set that aside. From here, we need to open up the bayonet. Be very careful what you're doing here. That's still a pointy bit. It can still hurt you. The reason we take the cleaning rod out first, though, is because if we didn't and we tried to take the gun apart right now, we could crack the stock or damage it. So make sure your cleaning rod's out before you commence with this part. Some of these stocks will just flop off the gun. This one's still pretty well strong. It's still pretty tight on this receiver. So there's a few ways you can go about doing this. You can grab onto the barrel between the gas tube and the front of the stock, and then you can use your palm to bash it off like that. You can also upend it and then bop the top of the stock onto the table, and it'll separate the two. Now, make sure if you're going to do the bopping, you put something on the table to protect your stock. And that's it. I'm going to cut in a piece of footage here of me taking apart the bolt. Okay, so there's really no way I can get this closer, and I hate zoom on these cameras. It's terrible. So on the SKS bolt, you have this cross pin, and it's kind of flared out on the other side with like a tombstone shape. You need to knock that cross pin out. That'll allow you to take the extractor and the firing pin out of the bolt. Now, if your firing pin can freely move in there, don't do this. There's no reason to. So you need to have a spot, and I have this handy dandy little piece of brass that I've just had over the years. But you need somewhere with something with a hole in it that's not going to damage your bolt for that pin to fall through into. So what we do is take a hammer and your punch. It'll go. Sometimes these can be pretty stiff. We need something a little bit longer to course it the rest of the way. Alright, once we get that pin out, I can show you that pin. That pin is flat on the bottom, round on the top. So flat surface on the bottom, round on the top. From there, be careful with the extractor because it's under a considerable amount of spring pressure as well. Pull back on your extractor and pivot it away from the bolt. There's your extractor. So if you want to clean out underneath there, you can. I've never, I always just use a toothbrush with it assembled, and it's never failed me. And now you can take out your firing pin. And there is a standard SKS firing pin. Now that pin that you just drifted out, when it's retaining your firing pin, the surface is sort of made up, and this is kind of what they do. That hump right there on the firing pin is what retains it into the bolt. Now I've seen some pretty worn examples where that hump is basically just worn right down and the firing pin will just back right out by itself. And that's unfortunate. So, yeah. I'm going to reverse this process real quick for you, because we need to get the rifle back together. So you're going to take your extractor, pop that back into place, take your firing pin, make sure the shorter flat is going into the bolt first, and the hump is facing upward. Now from here, what you're going to do is take your pin, and you're just going to get it started with your fingers. Ooh, this might be a tricky one. Be very careful here. You got to be extremely careful on this part, because if you glance off and hit the tail of that tombstone piece, you could break it off. So just get that guy started. Alright, so we got it started. I'm going to put it back up on our block. Now to finish it off, get my punch back. There we go. Good to go. Back into position, and as long as the surface of your extractor on this part is pretty much flush with that tombstone piece, you're good to go. You're fine. Alright, so that's probably the hardest part about the SKS. And there you have it, that's the bolt. Now, provided your bolt does this, your firing pin freely flops in there, there's no reason to take it apart. Yeah, so that is the standard SKS. We can also take apart the mainspring assembly, the captured mainspring. Now, if you try to fight it like this, what's going to happen is you're just going to be fighting a losing battle. Well, I just proved myself wrong. But a lot of times when you're trying to take these apart, they won't agree with you. They'll be collapsing in on themselves, and you'll just be fighting it all the time. What I do is I take that little drift that came with the gun, or sometimes doesn't, just a little piece of metal. I drop it into the tube, upend it, and then I grab onto the mainspring, and I pull it down. I pull this collar off, which is the retainer, and then I very gently ease it back up. And then I just pull it all apart. It's that simple. Now, let's reverse that real quick. There we go. And that's it. Now, if you've been trying to do that for a while and you just didn't figure that out, it took me a minute to figure out how to do that too, so don't worry. Well, that is your mainspring assembly. So we're going to put the whole gun back together now. I'm going to show you the difference on the 5966 here in a second, the gas system on that one. It's kind of a bit of a pain in the butt, but not too bad compared to the normal SKS it is. Next, what we do to put it back together, take our barreled action, and then you take your stock, and then I'm trying to get it in frame here. You line these two pieces up, like so. And then everything has to line up very nicely, and then we can squeeze it. Come on, back together. There's that. So next, turn the rifle over like so. Once it's sat back in the stock, where's a tool I can point with? This lip right here needs to fit into this lug right there. So take it, push that back down, and once we're happy with it, it's not going to give you any positive click, it's not going to tell you when it's in, but once you get this lug on the back of the magazine touching this little bar and it's underneath these two little hooks, you're good to go. And them two little hooks hook onto this pin on the front of your trigger group. So put those pins, or that pin, into the hooks and pivot it downwards. And then you just grab onto your receiver, take your other palm, give it a kiss like that, and that seats the rifle back into the stock and locks it all back together. Now you can close it if you want. I don't close it yet because we still have to get the bolt and everything back into the gun. So from here, take the return spring piston assembly deal, put it back in. Whoops. Okay, so you see why you can't have butterfingers with these things. That's under a considerable amount of pressure, and that's also why you wear safety glasses. So you take that piston, put it back into place, push that lever back down, and there we go. Next we take the gas piston, put it back into the gas tube, put the gas tube back onto the recessed part of the gas block and pop it back into place. Push the lever down, that locks your gas tube on. Now what I will do here is just something I probably should have done earlier. I'll undo the bayonet, put the cleaning rod back in. This way we don't have that pointy knife sticking out everywhere. Watch your fingers when you close your bayonet again. Take your bolt, put it into place. Your bolt carrier, you should have something that kind of looks like that. Push downward, slide it back in. Take the, see how you have the tube right here in my hand and then you got the rod? Well, you probably can't see that, but the wiggly part of the spring versus the straight part. Put the wiggly part into the bolt carrier and then turn and pull your lever back out. Take your dust cover, receiver cover, push that back in, push the pin in, rotate it and lock. Little function test. Lock your magazine back up. And your SKS is good to go. Now that's how you do a standard SKS. Hopefully not as clumsily as I did. But you gotta keep in mind, I'm kind of within the constraints of a 7-year-old camera, or 6-year-old camera or so. So we're gonna set this SKS aside. Okay. And this is the 5966A1 with the grenade launcher. Now the difference between the A1 and the normal 5966 is the fact that the A1 has flip up night sights both front and rear, and they're always dead. So yeah. So the gas tube on the 5966A1 is a little different. It's got a flared gas tube and a gas valve for turning it off for your grenade launcher. That way you can fire blanks out of the gun and have their grenade go boop off the end of it. So take your punch, put it right here into that lever, unhook it, not all the way though. You want that little nipple to be running inside that channel on your gas or your sight block. So then you just take your gas tube, pull it out, and now take this button, push it in, rotate it straight up, now pull it straight back toward you. Do not let it go, because there's a possibility that it's lined up perfectly with the stars and the planets, and it might go shoot off into the distance and you'll never see it again. So just wiggle it around until you feel it give up all its spring tension, and once it has, you can take it out. So a little bit of a pain, but the fact you get to launch grenades off the end of the rifle is kind of, it outweighs the pain. So yeah, put it back together, plop your valve back in, plop your spring back in, put your button back on, push down, push back, or towards the muzzle, lock that into place. And that's it. And that's the SKS video. Thank you guys so much for watching. Like, favorite, share, and subscribe if you enjoyed. I have an Instagram down in the description below if you want to give that a look. It'll be right down here. If you want to check that out, I'd appreciate it. So thanks again, guys. I did take a bunch of my stuff down recently, so if you noticed that, well, thanks for paying attention too. I'm just not happy with some of my stuff. I'm just getting rid of a lot of the older stuff and just cleaning it up. I've been meaning to get back out in the shop and do some more videos though, so let's do it again. Thanks for watching, guys.